Hello, Thought Roomies, and welcome. I'm your host, Hallie Rose. This week, I am coming to you from beautiful, magical, strange, weird, amazing Sedona, Arizona. 1 year ago, I came to Sedona for the first time. And I was meeting a group of friends here through a mastermind program that I have participated in, the Aubrey Marcus Fit for Service program. Last year, I met a young woman named Jinica Torrez. There was just something about Jinica that struck me, and I couldn't put my finger on it. And I hadn't even yet launched this podcast. I was just starting to do interviews and collecting them, but the Thought Room was not officially out in the world yet. And I asked Jinica to be on the podcast, and we were rooming together in Sedona. She turned to me and she said, well, don't you want to hear my story before you interview me? And I said, no, I just feel that you have something to share. So what you're about to hear in a few minutes is one of the most powerful stories that I have ever heard. And as I was hearing it during this interview, it was for the first time. So you'll soon understand why I experienced deep, deep emotion. I think that I probably cried through about half of this interview silently as I listened. Jinica is a super powerful storyteller. And this interview has actually been in the vaults for a year, waiting to be released. At the time, we weren't even sure if this podcast was ever going to be released publicly because of the vulnerable and highly sensitive nature of it. We decided to do this interview because we thought that it might be a powerful first step in Jinica's coming out into the world and her healing process. And she has given us permission to share her story with the world for the first time. In the past year, I have had the absolute pleasure of watching this woman completely flourish and step forward as a leader, a healer, a mentor, and a coach. She is currently studying psychology, and she has plans to go on to become a psychedelic therapist. And again, this is truly one of the most raw, vulnerable, heartbreaking, harrowing, and powerful stories of overcoming circumstances, of tapping in to the depths of a warrior heart, and a story about never giving up. A little disclaimer and trigger warning: if you've got children in the room, or if you have been affected by sexual abuse, you may choose to skip this one, as this podcast is highly sensitive in nature and contains sexually explicit material that may be disturbing to some. If after this interview you want to get in touch with Jinica and learn more about the powerful things that she's creating, you can visit her website, unravelingfern.com, or find her on Instagram at the.unraveling.fern. I love the name of her company, and it's a little bit of a nod to sacred geometry and to the Fibonacci sequence, and this idea of the fern as it gloriously unfurls. And that is absolutely what this woman has done. She shared with me just before releasing this podcast that doing this interview was partly the inspiration for her to move forward and put herself out there to create the Unraveling Fern. So again, I have done between 30 and 40 hours of interviews on this podcast, and never before have I been left speechless in the middle of an interview like this. So please join me and this incredible warrior goddess in the first public sharing of her breathtaking life story. Jinica, if you are listening to this, thank you for the gift of your voice, your bravery, and your medicine for the world. Jinica, welcome to the Thought Room. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure. I just want to say this is probably the coolest place that I have ever recorded an episode from. You and I are sitting literally in a vineyard. I mean, we are actually in the middle of grapevines growing on these fences. We are in front of this beautiful, amazingly large, stunning house in Sedona. And we've rented it with a bunch of ladies that we know to hold this women's retreat. And so we were like, we got to sneak away to find a spot for this podcast. And we ended up wandering into this vineyard, which is so cool. We're sitting on a blanket in the middle of grapes.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's incredible. So I always like to talk about how I ended up getting people on the podcast and how I ended up meeting people. So you and I met through Aubrey Marcus's Fit for Service mastermind program. We probably first met each other online, but then connected in Austin, Texas. And now we're here in Sedona. And where are you originally from?
I was actually born here in Arizona, but I was raised in California. I was literally just like pooped out here and then shipped out to California. But now I live in Arizona.
Yeah.
And I moved here in 2015, so I've been here for a little bit.
Yeah. This is my first time to Arizona since I think I was a child, and there's something so spectacular about this part of the country. I heard it said often before I came here, but it really is magical in its own right. There's just this strange, cool energy, particularly in Sedona. Do you agree with that?
I definitely agree with that. And, I spent a lot of my childhood here in Arizona. I have family in Williams. So I spent a lot of summers in like Flagstaff, Sedona area, going to the Grand Canyon and things. And when you're young, you kind of take it for granted and you just think that this is normal, And then when you grow up, that's when you get the realization of how special it really is. And so I'm super grateful to have the connections that I do with this land. And then also just for the experiences and things. And it truly is a magical place here.
Yeah. So I booked my flight here and I had never been. And then I started telling people, I'm going to Sedona. And their responses were, are you going to go see the energy vortexes? And I was like, what is an energy vortex? This is so cool. I got to look up what this is. I mean, maybe because you've lived here longer, you can speak to what they are, maybe a little bit.
Yeah, it's funny because growing up here, so being like a local, you kind of make fun of those people growing up, like, oh, look, those is weirdos, like going for the vortex. But, now that I'm older and I understand and I actually feel energies and things, like I totally love the energy vortexes here. And they're actually all over. I live in Lake Havasu City, and there's actually 4 vortexes out there as well. But it's just an energy gathering point on the earth. I don't exactly know how it works, but I know that like through the magnetic field and what have you, there's just like these natural spots where energy kind of collects from the earth, and you can tap into that energy. And so it's super magical and special.
Yeah, a friend of mine told me before I came, she said this particular energy vortex that she went to in Sedona, as you get closer, the trees are actually twisting. They're twisting all in the same direction, kind of in this cyclonic way as the vortex would. And I just thought that was amazing. So I'm really looking forward to visiting some of them. I think some of us are going to go later today.
Oh, nice.
And then definitely throughout the week, I'll be hitting those up for sure.
Nice.
Yeah.
I might have to join you on that.
Yeah. So you're here to tell your story, which I'm really excited to hear, because when I met you, I just felt there was a deep knowing in you. It's something that you carry in the way that you speak. And I can tell that you've been through a lot. And also in the way that your friends, people in our community speak about you, there's a wisdom there. And I think that I was really excited when you agreed to be on the podcast. And, another woman's voice is always so nice. So I would like to invite you to tell me a little bit more about you and start wherever feels natural for you.
Okay. Thank you. That's really nice compliments. One thing I've heard here with this group of people is it's really hard to see the label of the jar when you're in it. And when you say all these nice things about me, it's hard to believe that you're talking about me. So thank you for that. My story, I've been on a healing journey this year because I struggle with depression and anxiety, and I have chronic migraines. And I know that it stems from my childhood because I had a very traumatic childhood. And I never really allowed myself to accept that, I guess. I just kind of would try to run away from it and just tell everybody, I'm okay, I'm fine, And there's only so much running away you can do before it catches up to you. And I hit that point last year. I mean, I've hit that point a few times in my life, but it was really significant last year. And to the point where I was like, I can't get here again because I don't think I'll survive the next one. And anyways, so my journey starts when I was a little kid. My parents split up when I was, 1, really young. I'm the youngest of 2. My brother is slightly older than me. And I was kind of a mistake. My parents were not planning on getting pregnant when I came through. Mm. And so my brother and I are very close in age. We're only 18 months apart. And so when my parents split up, my mom came out to California to live with her mom. And we were raised out in California, right on the coast, a little town called Goleta, slightly north of Santa Barbara. I love it. And we moved in with my grandma, who had just recently married a man, so my step-grandfather, and his name is Romeo. And my trauma is that I was sexually abused by my step-grandfather from the time I was 3 until I was 13. And for me, I knew that, all I knew is that this was going on for as long as I could remember. And I found out that it started when I was 3, through Romeo, when I got him prosecuted, which is awesome. Not a lot of people with sexual trauma get that satisfaction, so I'm very grateful for that. But that's when I found out that it has started when I was 3. So when I was really young, I would try to tell my family about what was happening to me. But when you're a little kid, you don't have the language to really communicate that. And so the response that I would get was that they didn't care, or they, like, it is what it is, you know, and that I just had to learn to live with it. And my step-grandfather, he was a carpenter, and he used to threaten my brother and I that if we were to tell anybody what he was doing to me, that he was going to chop us up into little pieces and hide us in his construction sites. And so, of course, that makes it a little harder to speak about what's happening. But in my adult life, talking to my aunts and things, they told me that there were times that I would come to them and tell them, like, my private's hurt or whatever. And they didn't understand what that meant. You know, they just thought, oh, maybe she's getting a rash or something, so I'll just put some baby powder on her and she's fine. So I grew up with a lot of anger, and I started acting out when I was probably around 7 or 8. And I would do things like lie and steal. I would steal things from my mom's friends that would come over, or anytime we went somewhere, I would probably steal something from somebody's house or whatever. And when I was 10, I started smoking cigarettes, you know. And when I was 10, my behavior had gotten so bad that my mom felt like she couldn't handle me. She was dating this man that didn't want to have children, even though he already had 4 of his own. And so my mom was afraid that me and my crazy behavior was going to scare this man away. And so she ended up shipping me across the country to live with my dad, who I don't have a relationship with. My mom tried to get us to have a relationship with my dad throughout the years. And so she would save up all of her money to send us across the country to spend the summers with him. So I grew up flying on planes and stuff, which is actually kind of cool. But my dad would turn around and send us off to summer camps and stuff. So it was we never saw him. It was just a waste of time and money. I hated summer camp. Anyway, so my mom was sending me to live with this man who obviously doesn't want children either. And he just married the woman that he had cheated on my mom with. And they just had their first baby when I moved over there. And so my stepmom was not happy about having this crazy child come into her life, right? So my dad wasn't really into the picture. He was off working all the time. And so it was basically me, my stepmom, and my new half-brother. And I was basically like an indentured servant. I know that they were just trying to, I don't know, make me not so crazy by giving me structure or something. I'm not sure. But my stepmom, I think she had postpartum or something, but she got very depressed, and she would stay in her room with my half-brother and smoke cigarettes and all this stuff, super not healthy. But my role in the family was I was responsible for all of the cooking, all of the cleaning. I wasn't allowed to leave the house. I wasn't allowed to have friends. The only time I could leave the house was to go to school and back. And it wasn't healthy. And my grandparents on my dad's side came to visit once, about a year into me living there. And they saw how bad it was and that it wasn't healthy for a little girl to be there. And so my grandma took me out of that situation. And she moved me. She was going to have me live with her in Williams here in Arizona. And my aunt on my dad's side decided to take me in because she was homeschooling her kids. And I thought that she would be good for me. And so I went and lived with them here in Arizona in Kingman. And I spent a year being homeschooled. And this is when I was 11. And that year is the first time in my childhood that I was like actually allowed to be a child. It was the first time that I was in things like dance classes, and I was, it was the first time I was allowed to like have an imagination and just run around and like be free. And so I got better. I was a good kid. I was thriving in school. I was getting good grades. I was happy. And my mom saw this. And so she invited me to move back home. And at this time, she was still in that relationship with the man that doesn't want to have kids. And they moved into a house right outside of the city limits. And it was beautiful. I mean, it was literally on a cliff overlooking all of the ocean. And there's no neighbors. Like, it was beautiful. It's called El Capitan Ranch. And we lived on the beach side, super lucky. And we're not rich or anything. It was just from people who we knew. And it was an amazing situation. I'm so grateful for that house. Anyways, but because it was outside of the city limits and I was still going to school, I'm 13 at this time, we would go to school and then we would go to my grandma's house and wait for my mom to get off of work to come pick us up to take us home. Because my grandma lived literally right across the street from our high school. I was going to junior high at this time, which is like within walking distance of that school too. Anyways, so being back at my grandma's house, my step-grandfather had access to me again, and the abuse started up right away. And I immediately started acting out right away. And so I started lying, and I started stealing, and started to be a bad kid. And I ended up getting caught for shoplifting at a Kmart. And the police came, and they took mercy on me, thank God. And they said they would be willing to drop the charges if I agreed to go to counseling. And I said, hell yeah, I don't want to get charged. And so I went to counseling. And in the intake, there's like a form that says all of this stuff, right? And one of the questions is like, have you ever been sexually abused? And I said, yes. And even in that moment, my parents and even my therapist was like, are you sure this is what you want to say? Like, because once this is down, it's going to open up all of this stuff. And if you're lying about this, then it's going to be a huge deal. And people get in trouble and all this, right? And so it's just like super scary. I'm like, I don't know. I think I've been abused, but maybe not, like always questioning that if it was real or not. And so still nobody believes me, but the counselor had to report it to the police, and the police got involved. And they told me that they can only move forward if we can get evidence on him. And they told me that the only way to get evidence is to get him to confess over a recorded line. So I'm 13, and I'm in this like conference room full of police officers and all this like sound equipment and my mom, and super intimidating for a 13-year-old. And I've never called my step-grandfather on the phone before, and I had no idea how I was going to get him to confess to anything. And here we go, right? So I call him, and I get him on the phone, and I'm super nervous, and my voice is shaking like it is right now. And I'm trying to like have this conversation with him, and then I try to casually bring up, like, the abuse had just happened, not a few days prior. And so I was like, remember when you took me into the laundry room? Why did you do that? And he started confessing, like, well, I thought we were having fun. you know, this is what we do. And I love you. And this is how I show my love for you. Right? Gross. But I was able to get him to confess on the recorded line, which is all I needed. And the wheels moved forward from that point on. And people, my family, finally believed me. I wasn't making up stories. I wasn't lying. I wasn't a bad kid. And so then the legal process starts, right? So I'm 13, junior high, going into high school, which is already a hard time for any kid, right? And a girl. And I moved away and came back. So all of the people that I was friends with in elementary school, they like ignored me in junior high school. And I was this weirdo freak. And then, you know, I ate a lot of food for comfort because I had nobody to comfort me. So I was really chubby. And it was just a hard time. Junior high was not fun. And then going into high school, and that wasn't fun. And so it's like all the normal stuff, plus being overweight, plus dealing with this court stuff. And the court process took like 2 years for it to all go through. And by the end of it, he was sentenced 7 years. And he got out in 3 for good behavior. So I feel like I've been served a lifetime sentence, and he got nothing, slap on the wrist. But at least I got some sort of justice. Validation. I think if I didn't have him go to jail, I would probably still question if it actually happened or not. Anyways, once he was sentenced and I was 15, I was 220 pounds. And I decided that I wasn't going to let him control my life anymore. And so I joined Weight Watchers, and I ended up losing like 75 pounds and been able to maintain that weight loss, but I've always struggled with my weight. And especially when like things get rough, I always turn to food. And that's how I can kind of gauge how I'm doing. Is if I'm like absentmindedly going for the refrigerator, I'm like, oh shit, like I should probably journal right now instead. But that's definitely the cornerstone of my depression was all of this. And when it all came out, and my family was devastated, and my mom, I felt like I had to protect her. And so I always reassured her that she was a great mom and that I love her. And I felt like I was trying to be strong for her, and I would never allowed myself to like feel the pain or go down that road. And I just would shove everything down and not talk about it. We never talked about it as a family. And I didn't really realize that until last year, actually. In December, my brother kind of had a intervention, if you will, with my family. And it was the first time that we had sat down with my mom and my aunts and my brother and myself and then his wife and my significant other. And I'm 33. And that was the first time we had all sat down together since I was 13, I think. So 20 years of not talking about it. And just like saying that you're okay, you know? I was forced to go to talk therapy from the time that it all came out. So when I was 13 until I was 18. And I'm sure it helped, but I hated it. I hated talk therapy. And the second I was 18 and I was like free, I was like, I don't need that. I'm fine. And I've just been living my life kind of like that, like I'm fine. And just like struggling so hard just to be normal, running away from this sadness and depression and not really talking about it. And it's just been like a silent skeleton, I don't know, big brick on my shoulders. And there's been a few times in my life. So I had like a mental breakdown when I was 26. And that it's kind of like a perfect storm of things that happened. But the one thing that like really held me on a good path was the fact that I really wanted to be a dolphin trainer. And I dedicated all of my time and energy and strength into becoming a dolphin trainer. And that helped me to not go crazy off the rails. I mean, I went a little off the rails, but not like super crazy. Like drinking and partying and like that kind of stuff. I moved out of my house when I was 17, and I was on my own for a little bit, and I really got into like the drinking and partying phase because I was really good in high school. Like I was a good kid because I was trying to prove that I was okay, you know? And then once I was on my own, I was like, woo, crazy, let's go. And, but I had that goal of wanting to be a dolphin trainer, so that would bring me back from getting too crazy. I kept trying to go to school, kept trying to volunteer, trying to keep myself healthy. I was swimming because you have to pass this like crazy swim test to be a dolphin trainer. And anyways, I went to the school for animal training. That was like the best 2 years of my life. And, you know, to be a dolphin trainer at that time, really all you needed was volunteer experience. And if you graduated from the school that I went to, you were basically guaranteed a job as a dolphin trainer because the school is the only school in the country that does hands-on animal training. So it's very like prestigious in the field. And so it was really hard to get into that school too. And it took me 3 years to, like, first you have to get all your prereqs, and then once you get that, then you can apply. And it took me 3 years to get in after that process. And so I finally got into school in 2017. And the economic crash happened 2008. Did I say 17? I meant 2007, sorry. The economic crash happened in 2008, which changed the whole game because I was entering a field that's quote unquote entertainment, right? And so when the economic crash happened, the first thing that goes is all the entertainment stuff. You don't want to spend money on things that you don't have to, right? And so there's a lot of downsizing in the animal world, and a lot of people lost their jobs. And so a lot of people with a lot of experience would try for these entry-level jobs, which totally changed the game. So now instead of needing volunteer experience and like this associate's degree to your program, like now the minimum is you need your bachelor's degree and you need this certificate from this animal training school and you need volunteer experience and letters of recommendations. You know, it's like all of this stuff just to get an entry-level position that pays like basically minimum wage. And so that happened in 2008, and I graduated 2009. And before the crash, 90% of graduates from this program would graduate with a job. My graduating class, there was 3 people that graduated with a job. And so I was trying my hardest to get anything, any sort of animal job. And it was grinding. And I just didn't have it in me to keep going. It broke me. And I did land a seasonal position right after school. And it was an internship, so it wasn't anything special. And it was in Bermuda working with dolphins, which is absolutely amazing. Best time of my life. So I'm super happy that I had the experience of being able to work with dolphins. But that was the only experience I ever had. And when I came home from that, that's when I tried really, really hard to get any sort of animal training job. And I ended up working at vet hospitals just to get the animal experience. And that was one of the things that they told me in Bermuda. I asked them, like, what can I be doing to help my resume for these jobs? And they said, get medical experience, because anybody with medical experience is gold. So I was like, perfect, do that. So I became a registered veterinary technician. still applying for jobs. I was volunteering at the zoo. I was volunteering with this organization called Channel Island Marine Wildlife Institute, which I absolutely loved. But I had hit this point where I'd been applying for years and not getting anything, feeling run down at my job because I'm working full time, plus I'm volunteering and all this. I never had any time off. It was just like, go, go, go. And then I ended up getting pregnant. And one of the stories I've always told myself is that I never wanted to have kids and I never wanted to get married. And then I got pregnant and I was like devastated. And I had an abortion and I did it all so fast. I never really gave myself the time to really think about it. It was just like, gotta get it done. And the aftermath of all of that came crashing down on me. And so it was like that plus not getting my dream job and then my childhood that I've never dealt with. And so I had this like big emotional crash. And I was ready to kill myself. And I had been listening to the Joe Rogan podcast for a little bit at this time. And I've heard of ayahuasca. And I was like, well, if I'm going to kill myself, I might as well try this first. And so I started making plans on trying to find a place to go and do ayahuasca. And in that process, I had listened to a Joe Rogan podcast that had Aubrey Marcus on it. And he had just gotten back from doing iboga for the first time. And the way that he described his experience with iboga really spoke to me. And at that point, I knew that that's what I needed to do. And so I figured out where he had gone for his iboga experience. And I booked a trip. Took myself to Costa Rica for a week-long retreat. And I did iboga. And it was the most profound experience I have ever had to this day. It was like 20 years of therapy overnight. And it was the first time in my life that I felt like a whole, complete person. Whereas before, I have really struggled with having like a split personality. I had like my public self who was this like sweet, kind person. And then I had this dark secret self that I was super ashamed of and that would come and sabotage me. And it was the first time that I felt like one whole person. And it was the first time that I'd felt what true, genuine happiness was. And it was the first time that I actually felt grateful for my life. And it was the first time that I could look into the world and see the beauty. So I had this huge, profound moment. And I had this like awakening, like, oh my God, this is what I'm supposed to do. This is the reason I can't get my dream job, because I'm supposed to be spreading this message. If this can help me, it can help so many people. And I need to spread the word because nobody knows what iboga is. And so I contacted the retreat center that I went to, and I told them how passionate I was about this and how much I really wanted to learn more and I really wanted to get involved. And they invited me to go with them for their first ever trip to Africa, where they were going to bring people with them who were interested to learn more about the Bawiti and the iboga plant and the culture, and to be initiated into the tribe and to start the process of becoming an apprentice shaman. And I was like, hell yes, like this is what I want. This is my life. This is what I'm going for. Fuck yeah. And I told all my family. I quit my job. I told my friends. Everybody thought I was crazy. I drank the Kool-Aid, right? And I go to Africa. And I was there for a month, backpacking deep into the jungle, learning as much as I could about the Bawiti and the culture. And I was initiated into the tribe. And it was an interesting experience. Definitely not what I thought was going to happen. And so when I went to Costa Rica for the first time, I was poor because I'm a veterinary technician living in Santa Barbara. So I'm basically living paycheck to paycheck. And I took a loan out to go to Costa Rica. I knew that's what I needed, right? I don't care what the cost is. But I wanted to make it as cheap as possible. And they had two different prices. One, you can go and have your journey with the apprentice shaman, or you can have your journey with the actual shaman. But if you do it with the actual shaman, it was like $3,000 more. So I was like, fuck it, I'll just do it with the apprentice shamans. And I'm so grateful for that. But I had never met the shaman. He wasn't there when I was there. He was in Africa. So when I went to Africa, it was the first time that I met the actual shaman. And he was in charge of everything. And once we were deep into the jungle, he approached me to start a sexual relationship with me. And I didn't have the tools at that time to stand up for myself. And I was immediately put back into my trauma of my childhood and thinking that I needed to do whatever this man wanted for my own safety because I was in this foreign country and he has my passport and he has access to all my things and I might not get home if I make him mad, you know. So I just did whatever he wanted. And it broke me, you know, like I thought that this was where my life was supposed to go and that I was dead set that I was going to be this apprentice shaman. I was going to spread the word of Iboga. And now it's all fucked up because I had this sexual relationship with the shaman and I didn't want that. And he has a wife and a child and I can't be a part of any of that, you know? Like it's all muddy and nasty now and ugh. So as soon as I got home from Africa, I just was lost. And I had broken up with my boyfriend at that time. And because I was ashamed of what had happened in Africa and I didn't know how to face it, I didn't know how to talk about it. So I was trying to run away from it. And all my friends and family were like, what's up, you know? And I was like, oh, Africa, let's just forget about that. You know, I'm just going to be a vet tech again and, you know, just keep trying to be on the last path. And so I just did that and just tried to go back to my quote unquote normal life. And there was a lot of healing that I had to do from that Africa trip. And I tried my best to heal myself as much as I could. And I ended up getting back together with my boyfriend. We talked about what had happened, and he was so supportive. He's been so supportive of my whole journey. He's like an angel. But one of the things that really brought me back was we had done MDMA together on a full moon and hiked into the desert together. It was so beautiful. That was one of the most profound moments, aside from my Iboga trip, for healing. And I decided to move to Arizona to be with him. We were doing long distance for a really long time, on and off. And I was like, okay, well, maybe this is my path. Maybe to be with my boyfriend, give it 100%, right? So I decided to move to Arizona to be with him in 2015. And still trying to like maintain my normal life, being a vet tech and trying to do the animal thing. And whatever. And it was going okay, you know. My boyfriend and I were doing pretty good, but I just always have this like underlying angst and sadness and depression. And nothing was making it better. I thought maybe moving to Arizona would make it better. No, nothing's making this better. And, you know, I'm in a pattern with my boyfriend of like breaking up, getting back together, breaking up, getting back together. And it's all stems from communication. Both of us don't have the best communication, but I know, especially myself, when things get hard, I always revert inside myself and I keep it to myself and I don't reach out. I don't ask for help. And then it builds and builds and builds, which isn't good. And then you explode. And anyways, it's a cycle. And we had gotten a cat together when we first lived together in San Diego back in 2004, I think. And in 2017, she got sick. And it was devastating because she was our baby, you know. And she was only 13. Like, we thought she was going to be, you know, in her 20s. And, you know, as a vet tech, and she's getting sick. And you're like, what? Like, I can save her. This is what I've lived for, you know. And so I did all of the things I could to save her, and it wasn't enough. She had this very aggressive, very rare cancer. And from the time she first got sick to the time she passed away was just a few months. And it was really devastating. And it was hard for me and Kenny, and I think more so for Kenny, my boyfriend. And so that following year, 2018, was a really, really rough year. And my boyfriend was also struggling with things that he wasn't communicating to me about, which I didn't understand. And when he is upset, he kind of takes it out on me, and then I run the stories in my mind of like, what am I doing wrong? What am I, you know, like, I just internalize everything. I can't do anything right. I'm such a burden, all of this. And so it got to a point last year where I was ready to kill myself. And I ended up having a plan where I was going to hike into the desert and I was going to shoot myself and leave myself out there. And I did the hike and I had the gun and I sat out there and I completely melted down. And I was at a point where I was like, I can't live like this anymore. It's too fucking hard. But I also knew that I could not kill myself. And so I was just defeated. 1000% defeated. I didn't know how to move forward in that moment. And I surrendered. And hiked my ass back home, put the gun away, pretended like everything's okay. But I made a promise to myself that I was going to work on my shit. I can't live like this anymore. And it's too hard to struggle just to be quote unquote normal. And that's when I started hearing about this mastermind program that we're in. And it kept speaking to me. And I was like, I really want to do that. But it's also very expensive. And there's no fucking way that I can afford this program. But I'm going to apply anyways and see what happens. And they accepted me. And I started talking to my family about it. I was like, there's this program I really want to do. And this my mentor, Aubrey Marcus, is hosting it, and it's the first one ever, and how cool would it be if I could do this? And my biological grandfather passed away in October of last year. And he had left us with just a smidgen of money. And my aunt and my mom decided to give me that money for this program. And it all worked out. And I'm here. And this year has been the most transformative year of my life. And I definitely don't have all the answers. And I definitely don't consider myself wise. But I feel like I'm getting there. I'm learning. I'm walking the path. I finally feel like I'm on the right path. And I don't know what that means yet. But I know if I just keep moving one foot forward in this direction, I have faith that it will all work itself out the way it's supposed to. And that's my story.
Thank you for being so brave. I am completely at a loss for words right now. I've been looking at you crying for about 20 minutes. You asked me last night, do you want to hear my story before you interview me? And my gut reaction was no. No, I want it to be organic. I want you to share with me in the moment. And I am flabbergasted. I am in complete awe of every facet of that story. Yeah, it hits me really deep. I feel you in that. And you are an absolute warrior. I mean, you are a warrior. I asked you as well right before I hit record, so have you ever done an interview before? And you're like, never. No. This is the first time you're sharing your story publicly. And I am so fucking honored that you chose to share it here.
Well, thank you. I'm super honored to be here. So I thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, I'm in complete awe. You'll rarely find me as speechless as I am right now looking at you.
Mm-hmm.
And I related to parts of your story when you would let just a crack of hope in. Like, oh, this will be the thing. And finally my life will turn around and it will be okay. It's the dolphin trainer thing, or it's the moving to Arizona with my boyfriend thing. And then repeatedly, it just feels like life is shit kicking you and laughing at you.
Mm-hmm.
And when you start to believe that story, the entire world becomes this warped, dark place. Every face you look into is evil. Every car in traffic, every phone call, everything feels like a frustration, a nuisance, a chore. It feels like a chore just to be alive.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm imagining you walking into the desert with a gun and breaking open to the fact that, like, you can't even do that. It's like, well, what do you do from there? And I'm picturing the feeling, the heaviness walking back down the mountain with that gun and just going back to the very real day-to-day hell of your life at that point. I mean, I just, it obliterates me to think about. And the gratitude I feel that we're sitting here on this blanket together and you're still here sharing your story. Because so many people out there feel this way. I've had these moments and nobody talks about it.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody talks about it. It's not appropriate. We got to keep it all together. And this was partly why I wanted to do this interview with you, but also this podcast and do this sharing. Because people need to know it's okay.
Yeah. It's okay to share your story. That's been what's monumental for me this year and what's propelled me in my healing. I vowed to myself when I was in this mastermind program that I'm going to be as open and honest as I possibly can be. And the more I share my story, the more I say it out loud, the stronger I feel. And if other people can do that, if you can just realize that if you just open up that closet to the skeletons and release them, you'll feel so much better. And they'll still be there. There's still your story, but it doesn't control you anymore. And the more light you bring into it, the lighter it feels. And you realize also that everybody has these struggles. And it's not just you. And when you can see other people with those struggles being super successful, that's magic. That's been magic for me in this program.
You're magic. Yeah. You're absolute magic. You mentioned iboga, and you even said word for word, no one knows what iboga is. I actually think that's pretty true. I don't think it's quite widespread. Yet, especially even ayahuasca, which is a plant medicine native to Peru, comes from a vine, has psychedelic properties, and is now getting a reputation for having profound healing, emotional and physical healing benefits. Similar to what you said, like 20 years of therapy in one night. So iboga is another one of these medicines. Can you speak just a little bit to what it is?
Yes, of course. So iboga is the root bark of an African shrub. I think it's Iboga tabanape or something like that, scientific name. And they cultivate the root bark of it, and then you ingest that, and it's a very, very potent psychedelic. It's not a fun journey. My first time doing it, it was all purging for me. I had a lot to get out. And the apprentice shamans even approached me like the following day and said, we've never experienced somebody that had quite a violent purge as you did. And
throwing up.
Yeah. And it was just like literally nonstop for hours. And
you had to be just like dry retching at that point.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's all it was. But like violently dry retching.
Wow.
For hours.
Wow.
And in the moment of that happening, I could tell that they were kind of concerned, checking in on me and things, but it didn't seem like I was never scared. But and then when they approached me the following days, that was the most violent purge that they've ever seen. And if I was okay, and I was like, oh yeah, I'm fine. It was great. Like, thank God, I needed that. And then that opened me up, because when you go and do a journey, that's 2 sessions over the week. Because they're really long. They last a really, really long time.
Like how long?
So so you start in the evening, probably around like 7 or 8, around like a campfire or whatever. And then the journey is from that point when you first ingest it until it really doesn't leave you until the following day around noon, 3 o'clock is when I started feeling quote unquote normal. But you don't feel normal because you've been up all night and you're tired. And really, it stays with you for a while, because I remember on my airplane ride home, you see these like sparkles. I don't know how to describe it, this flashes of light. And I would see that on the plane. I was like, oh, it's still with me. This is fun.
Little fractals.
Yeah. Anyways, but yeah, it's a very intense psychedelic. And the reason I chose that over ayahuasca is I've never done ayahuasca, so I personally can't speak to this. But from what I hear, when you take ayahuasca, it kind of blasts you off into the universe, and you get all your answers from the cosmos. And with iboga, it really pulls you deep within yourself. And inside every person has that truth, that internal truth and knowing. And so I knew that my problem was within myself, and I really wanted to get those answers. Iboga is very not known, especially compared to ayahuasca, but it is known in the addiction community because it's one of the substances that really helps battle addictions. I don't know the specifics of it, but I know that it binds to some receptors that are there or damaged when you're in the midst of an addiction. And so it helps you to go through the withdrawal process without it being as, I mean, it's still intense, but not as like intense as it would be without the iboga. And you get it all done and out of your system within like that session versus like if you were to do your withdrawal naturally, I think it takes like weeks or even months to get yourself like clean and purged from that. And like that whole time you're battling like that sickness, you know, and like purging and all that. So it's very known in the addiction community, which every time I hear somebody has or is struggling with addiction or has a family member that struggles with addiction, I'm always like, hey, have you heard of iboga? If not, you should look into it. It's really good. So it's getting more well known. And I think it goes more by the name ibogaine, which is the derivative or like it's like the cocoa plant versus cocaine type of a thing.
Except very different.
Right. But yeah, I never struggled with quote unquote addictions, but I struggle with food and that type of addictions. I've realized recently that I do have an addiction to my own suffering. So we all have addictions. It's just they play out differently, and it all points to the same thing of internal stuff that we're not dealing with, and we're trying to numb that with something else, right? So even though I didn't have an addiction, I definitely do have addictions, and the iboga helped me with that.
Yeah. This is so fascinating to me. It's becoming more pervasive, this use of plant medicines to treat things like addictions and PTSD. I know a little bit about ayahuasca in particular, and a friend of mine, Jessie Gold, started this thing called Heroic Hearts Project, and they work with U.S. military veterans with PTSD and help fund their trips to go work with ayahuasca to process their trauma from being, on active duty, and some of the intense things that you see, which I think is just, it's so incredible that people are seeking alternatives, and that some of these things are really starting to be studied now. John Hopkins is doing a lot of research on psilocybin, and now there's MDMA assisted therapy is becoming, there's a resurgence of it. So that's, it's fascinating stuff.
For sure.
For sure.
Yeah, thank God.
Yeah, for sure. Jinica, thank you so much for being here with me today and for sharing your incredibly powerful, badass warrior journey with the world for the first time, and the bravery that took. I'm gazing into your eyes, and I just feel so humbled. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate this opportunity and to be here with you in this magical space.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure.